Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a major shift happening right now in the wild. You've probably seen the headlines. Yellowstone closes fishing on 3 rivers as water temperatures hit dangerous highs. If you've been following the situation, you know that on July 9, 2026, the park just suddenly shut down afternoon angling on some of its most famous waters. It's kind of jarring, right? To see one of the most renowned and sought-after outdoor destinations in the world abruptly halt such a cornerstone activity, but water temperatures have spiked to downright dangerous levels, and this harsh reality is fundamentally reshaping how we experience this iconic landscape.
So we really have to ask, why ban fishing for half the day? Like, exactly why are the Madison, Firehole, and Gibbon rivers strictly off-limits to anglers from 2 p.m. until sunrise? These aren't just your run-of-the-mill streams. These are legendary waters where folks literally dream of casting a line on a perfect summer afternoon. Picture it, an idyllic, sun-drenched day on the water, and then, boom, it's suddenly cut short by a hard 2 o'clock deadline. Now, you might think it's just a fleeting reaction to a particularly hot week, but there is a much deeper, much more structural dynamic at play here when air temperatures push near 90 degrees and river flows run unusually low.
Which brings us to Section 1, the geothermal mystery, or when rivers run hot. To truly understand this daily shutdown, we actually have to look underground. You see, these specific rivers flow directly through the park's most active geyser basins. They aren't your typical icy mountain streams fed solely by snowmelt. Take the Firehole River. It winds straight through the upper, midway, and lower geyser basins, navigating right past boiling vents and steaming cauldrons. And the Gibbon River? It passes directly through the Norris Geyser Basin, which is the absolute hottest thermal area in the entire park. In fact, nearly a quarter of the Firehole River's flow comes straight from these hydrothermal vents. This dumps an immense amount of geothermal heat into the water, raising the river's baseline temperature by an astounding 20 degrees Fahrenheit compared to a normal freestone stream. So by the time the Firehole and Gibbon meet up to form the Madison River, the water is already starting at a massive thermal disadvantage.
And because this boiling water flows 24/7, these geothermally heated rivers simply never get the chance to cool down. Think about a typical river in the American West, right? When the sun goes down, the cold mountain air acts as a sort of nocturnal reset button. It pulls the heat out of the water so the fish get a break. Well, Yellowstone's thermal rivers don't have that luxury. They are constantly, relentlessly injected with hot water from below. This continuous heat source keeps water temperatures dangerously elevated long after dark, completely eliminating that crucial overnight recovery period.
Let's move on to Section 2, the 68-degree danger zone and the biology of trout survival.
The moment the water temperature crosses that 68-degree mark, it triggers an absolute biological crisis for cold water trout. Since trout are cold-blooded, their entire metabolism is dictated by the temperature of the water around them. Now, you might naturally wonder, if anglers are practicing catch and release, why is it still so deadly for the fish in warm water? I mean, after all, the fish goes right back into the river, right? Well, a 2008 Montana State University study looked directly at this, and the researchers observed that fish hooked in water above 68 degrees are significantly more likely to die, even if the angler does absolutely everything perfectly. Even with flawless handling and an immediate release, the fish still succumb.
The crucial point here is a terrifying biological trap. As temperatures rise towards 68 degrees, an 18-degree jump actually doubles a trout's metabolic rate. This means they suddenly need far more oxygen just to survive basic daily functions. But here is the cruel irony of aquatic biology. Exactly when the fish need more oxygen, the warmer water holds significantly less of it. When a fish fights an angler, lactic acid builds up rapidly in its muscles. Imagine trying to sprint a marathon at high altitude while holding your breath. That's kind of what the fish is experiencing. In warm, oxygen-depleted water, the fish's body just cannot process that intense fatigue. The tragic result is that a fish can easily die from sheer exhaustion hours after being safely released back into the current.
Now, you'll often hear the term Hoot Owl Restriction used across the West for these time-based fishing closures. But what's really interesting is that the history of the phrase actually has nothing to do with fish at all. It originates from early 20th century logging camps up in the Pacific Northwest. During bone-dry summers, loggers would work the cool pre-dawn shift to prevent their hot machinery from sparking devastating wildfires. Because they were out working in the pitch black before dawn, right when the local owls were actively calling, it affectionately became known as the Hoot Owl shift. Decades later, Fisher's management just borrowed the catchy term to describe their own heat-based early morning restrictions.
When we compare the park's rules side by side with neighboring Montana, you really see just how fragile Yellowstone's ecosystem is. Montana typically waits to trigger a closure until the water hits 73 degrees, or 66 for native cutthroat, and importantly, they reopen their waters at midnight. They can do this because their normal rivers get that refreshing overnight cooling we just talked about. Yellowstone, on the other hand, is basically managing a preheated system. They have to act much more conservatively, closing at the lower threshold of 68 degrees and staying closed all night long until sunrise. That continuous underground geothermal heat makes standard management rules totally obsolete.
Okay, on to Section 3, a 3-year warning trend. This is definitely more than just a fluke.
When we look at the data over the last 3 summers, an undeniable compounding pattern emerges. This recent closure is driven by consistently hotter, drier summers and significantly lower snowpack across the entire region. In 2024, the park saw full 24-hour closures starting July 15th. But look at 2025. The thermal threshold was breached on June 19th. Guys, June 19th is remarkably, shockingly early for summer closures to begin, and those restrictions lasted all the way until September. And now, in 2026, restrictions began on July 9th as air temps hit 90 and the water crossed that fatal 68-degree line. It's clear that thermal stress is hitting these ecosystems earlier and much more predictably than ever before.
Let's look at Section 4, adapting to the new normal and Yellowstone's big fix.
Rather than just helplessly reacting to dying fish and shutting things down every single July, Yellowstone made a major, proactive structural change to how they manage these waters. For 2026, the park successfully shifted the opening day for these specific rivers to May 1st. That's almost a full month early. It's honestly a brilliant hack of the system. While other rivers in the Rocky Mountains are freezing cold and muddy with heavy snowmelt in early May, the Madison and Firehole are wonderfully unique. You might literally be standing with snow still on the riverbanks, but the geothermally heated water is warm, which triggers early, prolific insect hatches. It provides absolutely fantastic angling exactly when the fish are in highly oxygenated water and can easily handle the stress of being caught.
Of course, adapting to this new normal also means adapting how we interact with the water. You can't just wade in with any old gear anymore. If you're planning an angling trip, you have to know that you're restricted to fly fishing only on these rivers, because traditional bait often leads to deeper, more fatal hook injuries. You also have to use barbless hooks to guarantee a lightning-fast release, keeping the fish in the water as much as possible. Lead tackle? Completely out, ensuring local fish-eating birds like loons and swans aren't poisoned. And those classic felt-soled waders are entirely banned now, because that damp felt is notorious for trapping and spreading invasive species, like the devastating whirling disease. Finally, any native Yellowstone cutthroat trout you catch must be released completely unharmed.
As we zoom out to the broader climate projections, the models indicate an average temperature rise of 1 to over 3 degrees Celsius by the 2050s and 60s for the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Functionally, a rise of just a couple of degrees is absolutely devastating for our river ecosystem. It means that 68-degree biological trap we discussed earlier will trigger weeks sooner in the spring and persist much later into the fall, severely stretching out the season of oxygen depletion and thermal stress.
This alarming warming trend brings us to a harsh climax. Native cutthroat trout could soon lose over half their historical habitat. Let that sink in for a second. Half of their natural range could become entirely uninhabitable. As rivers continuously warm beyond safe biological limits, these highly specialized fish are going to be forced to migrate further upstream into cooler, higher elevation refuges just to survive the summer months. This geographic shift fundamentally reframes these strict management tactics. They're no longer just temporary summer fixes. They are the permanent new normal for the entire region.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to consider. As the underlying waters relentlessly continue to heat up, how long can early spring openers and gear restrictions truly protect these magnificent rivers? It's a deeply delicate balance between preserving an iconic human tradition and protecting the very biology that makes it possible. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you walk away with a much clearer understanding of what's really happening beneath the surface in Yellowstone.